everyone. Welcome to our fifth installment of the HAQQ webinar. For those of you who have been with us from the get-go, from the start, you already know who we are, you know what we do. For those who are newcomers, welcome. I'm going to give you a brief overview of what HAQQ is before introducing our guest speaker. My name is Abbas Kabalan. I am the co-founder and CLO of HAQQ, and also the managing partner of Kabalan and Kabalan Attorneys and Consultants, and a fintech lawyer. What we do at HAQQ is basically HAQQ is the leading legal tech company in the Middle East, and we're on a mission to digitize justice. And what we mean by digitized justice is we're providing legal professionals with the technology required in order for them to streamline their operations, grow their business, acquire more clientele, and deliver legal services more efficiently. And as part of that endeavor, our most recent let's call it product, is that we've started digitizing bar associations in the MENA region. So we've spearheaded, and we're the first company to start offering full digitization services for bar associations. And as part of the digitization of justice and of the legal profession, we have a very big focus on the legal community that we're creating that you've became part of just by joining this webinar. So what we mean by that is we're trying to create a global community of legal professionals where legal professionals can come together, exchange opinions, have academic discussions on legal matters, and so forth. And I do apologize if there's a bit of noise. I am joining you from my car. I just got out from a transaction negotiation and heading back to the office, so I do apologize for any noise in the background. So as I was saying, part of our legal community is that we focus a lot on academic development, sort of speak. And as part of that academic development, we have these webinars, these weekly webinars that we've launched that you are part of today, as well as our international conferences. And I know that a lot of you have been part of the conference we did last year called Lawyers of Tomorrow 2, which to date is the biggest AI conference in the region. And by AI, I mean AI and legal conference in the MENA region. So that's basically what we do at HAQQ. This is who we are. Once again, I'd like to welcome everyone to this webinar. Today's webinar is going to be very special, especially to me as a fintech lawyer and as a crypto asset enthusiast. I'm very excited for our guest. Our guest is, if I may say, a very prominent figure in the crypto asset legal scene. I'm not going to take too much time introducing him. I'm going to leave the floor completely to him to introduce himself as he pleases. And without further ado, if you please, Mr. Evans, can take the floor and start your webinar. We are all ears.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that introduction. It's great to be here. Great to be speaking with the HAQQ community again. Always so thrilled to see what you guys have been up to with the digitization and the spearheading of both knowledge and infrastructure around the legal community in the GCC and Middle Eastern regions. It truly is fantastic. So it's really my pleasure to be here speaking with everybody. And we're going to probably spend about the next 30 or so minutes together, just talking about something that I think is very interesting and is very important, especially when it comes to the GCC and digital asset region and the two kind of combining together. Now, couple of things. I'll start by introducing myself, and then I'll go through just a couple of interesting things. But first of all, you may notice there's an absence of slides. I know that some people love to present with slideshows. I know that they really enjoy to kind of point and aim and give lots of very fundamental statistics and information. That's not particularly my style. I find that after 10 or so minutes, people get very disengaged, and ultimately it tends to become a little boring. So what I'm going to do is make this as more fun and as interactive as I can for everybody, which should be a little bit interesting. And you also may have noticed that I'm in Dubai at the moment. That's for Dubai behind me. So this is a fantastic time to be doing this because I've spent the day in meetings. I've got meetings all this weekend as well. And it's really reminding me exactly how much of a hub this region is and all of the very exciting stuff that's happening. But let me start by introducing myself. I'm Cal Evans. I'm a lawyer. I am the managing associate of Gresham International. I'm really proud of a lot of the work that we've done internationally and with so many fantastic clients, some of who are also clients of HAQQ. It's great to, alongside our typical legal work, have done some of the things that HAQQ have done. And I myself am honored to have written a couple of books, been quoted in a couple of journals, and really have had the ability to help a couple of governments and regional regulators spearhead a lot of the work that they've been doing and they have been doing in the past. So what I like to explain to people is that whenever I introduce myself, I start by telling people I'm a lawyer, but I feel like that's only really a fractional part of the things that I do in this industry, as I know so many of you do as well. Once you're dragged in, you're dragged in, and I think you're very much there for the long haul. To be here in the GCC is always fantastic. We made a commitment about 2 years ago now to make a much bigger footprint in the GCC. That's seen us and myself working in Ras Al Khaimah, working in the DIFC with the courts there, and assisting a number of the regulators and the kind of advisory bodies understand a little bit more about how digital assets work and how they can really be deployed in the region. And so, of course, we can't discuss digital assets without first really explaining what it is that they do and how they're really beginning to impact day-to-day life. And I think what we'll do is we'll take a look at some different regions and then compare that to the GCC region as to what they are doing. So if we look at digital assets and how they're used, we've evolved a lot from the days of just describing things as crypto and saying, oh, look, yes, this is crypto, this is great, but really that's one element of digital assets. Here now in 2024, we're seeing some amazing things being done. We're seeing digitized art, digitized ownership, digitized gamification, digitized voting protocols, digitized ownership. And there are so many different veins in which digital asset falls that it's almost now becoming impossible to really explain everything that they do and everything that they have the capability of doing. So what we do is we look at what some other regions are doing and then focus back in on the GCC. If we look at the United Kingdom, it's a great example where I'm from, there is a real drive at the moment for digital asset adoption based around securities and how they're being utilized in a security sense. The UK FCA is developing a framework which is based around two things: blockchain and crypto assets, so crypto itself, and separating those into two different protocols, which is really helping us as legal professionals to understand where things will fit and what particular lane they will fall into. Then we kind of look at Europe. And with the birth and the launch of things like MiCA, which is coming down the pipeline, Europe is taking a slightly different approach in so much as they are enabling individuals to and companies to launch digital assets, yes, very much in a securities vein, but they're not ignoring, but they haven't quite made a definitive decision on what the rest of digital assets look and feel like. So there's some good flexibility as far as that goes. And then we also, obviously, we finally turn to the GCC. And the reason I love the GCC is because, as we all know, it's a harmonious region, but there is the ability for countries to work together and to also develop their own frameworks. So if we look at some of the region, the leaders in the region, we have Saudi, we have Bahrain, we have Qatar, and we have the United Arab Emirates. These are really the core hitters that we look at. And having traveled to each of these countries, having spoken there, having worked there, having engaged with either one of the regulators or perhaps some of the banking community there, drawing on the experiences that we see, it's fantastic to see that each of the region's countries are treating this as an opportunity to become competitive. What do I mean by that? Well, the European Union has taken the opportunity to harmonize their framework. It's very much in the vein of what the European Union does. They've developed MiCA. Obviously, the European Union is a more solidified trading bloc, so it's very common that they would create their own ecosystem and their own framework around things. But what this has done is this has taken the individual member states' ability to legislate on a number of things, and it's compartmentalized it. Now, obviously, as a Brit, I have very mixed emotions about how the European Union handles things. I think freedom is potentially a better thing in terms of jurisdictional premise, and what might be right for one member state in the European Union might not be right for another, but that's okay. We take the law as we find it, and obviously we operate within it. And so what we do is we take that in comparison to the GCC, where we look at, and I think we can all safely say that the UAE is the leader in this, developing an advanced framework and creating a protocol which enables people to do a number of things. And really that is to innovate, to create, and to share what they are doing. And those three things are very important, because really, if we think of creation, innovation, and sharing, creating, I'm building something; innovating, I'm spearheading it, and I'm spreading it out, and I'm sharing it, which is I'm allowing other people to use it for my own benefit. That is where we find a lot of our governance and regulation coming from. And so if we keep with the United Arab Emirates, we now have things like the VARA protocol, and the VARA protocol, which was placed into effect through the Emirati of Dubai, although the DIFC is exempt from this, really shows people how kind of forward-thinking the GCC, excuse me, the UAE is. And this is basically enabling people to create things within a framework in terms of crypto assets, and it's a registration which enables and ensures that companies are complying. It's not overly strong, but it's very effective at what it does. Then we look at two other of the Emiratis in the UAE, which are RAK, Ras Al Khaimah, and Abu Dhabi. And they've taken very different approaches. Obviously, Abu Dhabi, being the centralized government, has enabled a protocol and set rules in place which enable people to really kind of head there if they're looking to create more financial-based products. Obviously, Abu Dhabi priding itself on being a financial hub, and the head of the UAE. RAK, on the other hand, has gone a very different way. RAK has focused on decentralized organizations and focused more on the ability of group-led projects, which is why we have the birth of things like the RAK DAO and the creation of specific business licenses in the RAK entity or the RAK free zone. And then if we compare that to Bahrain, Qatar, or Saudi Arabia, I've always said that Bahrain and Qatar are almost becoming legacy countries in this particular technology set. Digital assets is something that the central government of Bahrain has made perfectly clear is welcome, providing that it's used properly. And they're really enabling the development and the growth and infrastructure of what we call grown-up projects. So we know that the Bahrain sandbox, issued by the central government for the deployment of crypto or digital assets, is a very forward-looking framework, but we know it's also a very expensive one. And of course, where there's cost, there is a tendency that this will drive away bootstrapping startups that are trying to create things on a budget. Qatar is very similar. Qatar has a very, very similar framework to Bahrain in how it's deployed. And then the outsider, or the newcomer, I guess we could arguably say, is Saudi Arabia. And many people forget that Saudi has one of the largest markets in the region, but it's only really just begun embracing crypto and digital assets. Whenever people ask why that's the case, it is not because they are not a forward-looking country. Saudi, as we've seen time and time again, under the guidance of His Highness, is a fantastic jurisdiction, and it really has forward-looking mentality. But actually what it's doing is it's been very conservative in its approach. And we see that very commonly from Saudi. And I was very honored to speak on stage last month with one of the prominent members of the Saudi Central Bank. And he made it very clear, look, Saudi is welcoming innovation and it's welcoming digital assets as they are, but they're not willing to welcome what we refer to as almost not gambling, because obviously Saudi does not allow gambling, but projects that are not solid in their fundamental and their foundational principles and what they're building. Great examples of that. Sport is very popular. It's very common in Saudi. It's used a lot, and digital asset companies are launching in that market furiously. And we're looking at digital asset companies that are enabling the digitization of assets. Obviously, Saudi is a natural resource heavy country. Its ecosystem and its actual balance is based on a lot of natural resources. And so the digitization of those create a very interesting exploration point for large companies and the central government to look at. So even just taking a quick 10-minute dive into how the GCC handles digital assets, we can begin to see that there's some very, very different approaches and different ways that this is being handled. And for us as legal professionals, and for those of you who aren't, it's great to know this. You have the ability to harness the power of an open framework. And one of the things that I remind a lot of people of who haven't necessarily come from the GCC region, or perhaps don't operate in the GCC often, is the concept of business licenses. And business licenses is very important. Obviously, we see this almost in every country in the GCC, from Turkey all the way down. And the business license is something that is not typically seen in Europe. It's not typically seen in most Western jurisdictions. And the idea that you form your company is, well, I've created it, I've done it. And if we look at, for example, again, the United Kingdom or many places in Europe, you don't then have to go and obtain a business license unless you're operating a very, very specific niche market, maybe the energy market or the finance market. And then we use this term regulated. You become regulated rather than licensed. And so the GCC is fantastic because the license framework is really what allows the flexibility of companies operating within it. And then let me elaborate on that. So when I set up a company in Dubai or Saudi, what has to happen is either the free zone or the central authority, depending on whether it's a free zone or a mainland company, is established. That's great. Then you go through the process of obtaining your business license. And again, for people from the UK and from a lot of other countries, this is a very foreign concept. And that business license is really where you are, okay, certifying you're allowed to do business, but it is where the central governments and regulators have the ability to create of control. So the signifying piece of a client or perhaps your own startup, which says, look, I'm here, I'm happy to be looked at by this regulator, and I'm happy to ensure that my business processes and my protocol meet the needs of this regulator. And this is very different. This is very important because if you look at a lot of offshore jurisdictions, so to be clear, free zones in the UAE are considered offshore. A lot of them are for a tax purpose, although I do appreciate the new tax framework is changing that slightly, but work with me here. Then if we look at somewhere like the Seychelles or the British Virgin Islands, these are also offshore jurisdictions, but there is no requirement for a business license. And so we begin to ask ourselves the question, well, what differentiates a client that establishes or a startup that establishes in the Seychelles over a GCC region location? And it's this business license, which is the core piece, right? Gone through a check, I've had somebody look at me, and I'm willing to comply with these rules. And that is very, very important. And as the ecosystem has grown, we've seen how governments have used those licenses to help that ecosystem and to assist those companies that are looking to establish within the country or the free zone to do business. And this is the number one thing that we look at. And for obviously our learned friends and our lawyers on this session who are based in the GCC, you're very familiar with the concept of business license. It's day to day for you, right? I have a business license. I work as this. This is great. But like I say, for others, it's a foreign concept. And really, when we look at the business license framework, it is this that has changed the most. If we think about it, the formation of a company, this hasn't changed with digital assets or with anything else. With the oversight and regulatory committees, this hasn't changed, like with anything else. Central bank operations, opening bank accounts, securing insurance, any of these things haven't changed. What has changed is the business process around business licenses. And this is where we see our strength in the digital asset space, especially when it comes to the GCC. Because what we have the ability to do is shop. And we have the ability to look at different jurisdictions based on what our entity, our organization, or our client is trying to achieve. So if we take RAK, for example, there is the RAK free zone, there is the RAK DAO. You can go through their business licenses and look what is best for your client or your startup. And the same is true with any other jurisdiction in the GCC. And now we have VARA on top in the UAE. And we know that other countries like Bahrain, like Qatar, are already looking at developing their own version of VARA, Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority, or a framework under which an additional license is required for those working within specific digital asset areas. Now, this also presents a very, very, very interesting juxtaposing view. I love this expression, when something is very different. Because if we look at the central government of Dubai, who have done amazing things with, for example, blockchain, distributed ledger technology, they've embedded a lot of these technologies in the day-to-day processes that we see: identification, verification, voting, even down to a lot of the traffic lights which run Sheikh Zayed Road. Many people don't know, but there's some of the traffic lights are embedded with blockchain technology. And so this is great, and it's fantastic from a technological point of view. But what does it mean for clients and us who are working in digital assets? Meaning, at what point do we have a regulated digital asset that is doing something which requires to be regulated? And I don't even necessarily mean a security, because that's one element. We'd be looking at cross-border transactions, foreign exchange protocols, or something as simple as messaging, a communication messaging framework. And so now we have to actually begin to extrapolate and work with licensing authorities and regulators to say, look, we know that your framework is fantastic for securities, and we appreciate that a lot of digital assets may come along as crypto or security tokens or something that's a hybrid of the two, which is a security if it is, and it falls in this vein, but it's not if it isn't, and it falls in this vein, and that's great. But now we know that digital assets are growing up. I always take the example of esports, play to earn gaming, reward gaming, P2P gaming, anything that's related with gaming can now have digital assets built in. And if we take a marketplace, which enables the sale and the swapping of digital assets, and the digital assets which maybe have been embedded into a game as either a blockchain or something else, part of a blockchain or something else. If someone was to open, as a hypothetical, an exchange which would enable people to buy, sell, trade, and swap those digital assets, if we break down and we look at some of the guidance and some of the rules that have been created, this net has been casted or cast much too wide. Because really what has happened is the regulators, in their keenness to protect people, which is obviously their job, have caught a few of the things that they shouldn't have done. And so this is why we need to make sure two things happen. First of all, that they are aware of it. And secondly, that you are aware of it. Because really, it's not doing its job. It's doing its underlying requirement. It's protecting people, right? But it's stifling innovation. And if we listen to a lot of the Dubai Innovation Hub, Ras Al Khaimah Incubation, the Bahrainian Sandbox, this word innovation is at the core of a lot of what the GCC tries to do. Come here, we will help. And I'm focusing on the business license element because everybody knows the taxation piece, the ease of formation, these things are, this is fine. This will always attract people. That doesn't matter on the industry. What does matter here is this licensing framework, which is working. If we look at a number of clients and a number of organizations working within this industry, if you were to speak to most of them, and I will admit this is something I've never done a poll on, or I don't have actual statistics on, but I'm willing to bet that a large number of them are looking to have oversight and are looking to be regulated and are looking to have somebody exploring what they're doing and making sure that they're doing it right. And that's very, very, very important because it really differentiates the user base ability, and user base protections. And in an industry where we've seen some nefarious things and some bad actors and some, I mean, for those of you who are new to the industry, you will grow to know this. For those of us who have been in it a while, unfortunately, it's a part of the stigma that we have to overcome. And really what it's doing is it's enabling those that want to differentiate themselves and stand out. There is a stigma with a lot of jurisdictions in the GCC. If we look at Dubai, if I talk to some clients in certain parts of the world, and not even necessarily clients, but individuals, they'll say, I don't know how I feel about Dubai. It feels like the place where everybody runs away to if they do something wrong, or I don't necessarily want to look at Saudi because it's going to clamp down. It's going to, these views, these are old-fashioned views. This is not how the GCC looks or feels or operates right now. These are very forward-looking ecosystems, very forward-looking countries. And the innovation that they are aspiring is allowing us as innovators to capture the imaginations of so many people and to help them bring their projects to life, which is really part of what we have to do. So if you are a lawyer on this session right now, which I think most people are, there is the ability for you to look at the GCC as a whole and really begin to explain to your clients who are not in the GCC why they should be in the GCC. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, if they are in the GCC or they're moving into it, explain to them where they should be based. We see great collaborations with lawyers in all of the jurisdictions. In fact, HAQQ is such a good testament to that. We partner with fantastic lawyers all over the GCC. And it's great to work with so many of them and so many of you. And what we see is this desire to want to serve clients in the best way that is possible. So if you are a lawyer, those are really the two things that you have to be considering. Why am I bringing this individual or this company to the GCC? What are the benefits? And what's the best location within the GCC to establish that client or that company? If you're not a lawyer on this call and you're looking for perhaps some guidance, or you've been working with HAQQ in another capacity, perhaps you're a regulator or somebody that's fringed to the industry, I would say just keep communicating and keep talking, because as you can tell, I've been speaking at you now for probably quite a while. We've got the ability to actually begin to harmonize a lot of what the message is. But we don't want to lose that competition, because as I began by explaining, if we look at places like the European Union, now this is one regulatory framework. If you are in Poland, Estonia, France, Germany, it doesn't matter. You now have to comply with the same framework. We see sometimes how these have weaknesses, and I want to make sure that the GCC and everybody within it retains the protection with competition. And I think therein lies one of the main things on the GCC. Anthony, I noticed that your screen went big then, so I'm not sure if you were going to jump in or if that was just a I'm not hearing anything from you, so I'm going to assume it was just a technical issue. So we've got about 10 minutes left here on this session, give or take some change. You guys you're more than welcome to ask any questions. Anything that you'd like to know, perhaps anything you'd like to brush up on, or maybe even talk a little bit about your experience in the GCC. I think we can, I believe we can do a Q&A. I think that's, oh, okay, only host and panelists can see the question. Okay. Zoom is one of these wonderful things that I have a love-hate relationship with. I love using it, but more often than not, it hates working with me. So you guys are more than welcome. Okay, right. Anthony, I'm hoping you haven't abandoned me here because I think there's only so many things I can do as a panelist. Okay, we have a hand raised by Riva.
I'm here.
Hi, Riva.
Ready to assist. If anyone wants to speak, please raise your hand so that I can give you permission to speak. And I think someone has raised their hand, so I'm waiting.
Very cool.
Yeah, so perhaps I could assist you and get the ball running with the questions. Again, it's Abbas, the co-founder of HAQQ, but I am using Riva's account, who is our head of marketing. So, Cal, if I may, I have a question when it comes to crypto asset or digital asset regulation versus innovation. So my question is, when we have entities such as VARA and other GCC jurisdictions looking to have these special entities that regulate or oversee the regulation of crypto assets and cryptocurrencies, how do you, in your own perspective, how do we balance between regulation and innovation? Because often regulation halts innovation or at least slows it down, so it hinders innovation. And the less innovation we have, the more regulation we have, the less innovation we have. But the less regulation we have, the more risk and systemic risk, especially with crypto assets, we have. So in your own perspective or in your own experience, how do we mitigate between both, and how are GCC jurisdictions managing that?
Yeah, this is a great question. It's something that we think about a lot. How do you, it's not a risk reward protocol, but it's how do you balance that finite relationship between innovation and regulation? It's the two sides of the same coin, no pun intended. And ultimately, the way that this looks, and the thing that the GCC does very well, unlike other jurisdictions, is it has the ability to step in and take control. Let me give you a couple of examples. So if we look at the deployment of VARA, VARA went through a very large consultation period. This is the UAE Dubai based VARA protocol. Went through a fantastic period where there was lots of communication, lots of parties engaging, and a very stable VARA framework was created. Fantastic. However, the only problem with that is now we're beginning to see some weaknesses in it. Does it really do what we need it to do, or is it just something that is for show? And so we've seen this, and we've seen this be a problem. And the number one issue that it stemmed from was the ability for individuals to set up a company. And setting up a company in Dubai, we'll stick with Dubai as the example, is actually relatively hard compared to a lot of the rest of the world. It's a longer process, it's harder to do, and it's actually quite confusing and quite problematic. There are a number of free zones you can choose from. Those free zones then assist you with the VARA implementation. There's in the DIFC, which is separate to that. You've then got lots of moving parts which happen. And when I say that the GCC steps in, this was an obvious complaint and an obvious problem, right? It's hard to set up a company. If I can't set up a company, I'm not going to fall under the VARA framework. The VARA framework becomes useless. And so His Highness stepped in and said, look, I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to get rid of this confusion. And we know now in 2025, there's going to be a centralized portal for companies to be established in the UAE. And you'll be able to select your jurisdiction. You'll be able to compare them. You'll be able to set it up online very easily. And if we were to compare that to another country, that step may not have been taken. And so what we have is the ability for actually, as part of the legislature and the judiciary protocol within this region, somebody to step in and say, look, this isn't working and it needs to be changed, and get it changed. So I think that is a massive strength of how innovation isn't stifled in this region. It's actually encouraged. And it's really encouraged to continue to grow. Okay, see if there's any other hands up. Anyway.
Hello.
Yep.
Hi, so it's Maroon.
Hi, Moran.
So thank you for this webinar. I have a quick question. If you can expand on one of the examples that you gave, and it was about the e-sport and e-gaming industry and the digital assets that are implemented in it. And I want you, if you can, to expand more on the opportunities that you can have as a consumer or as a legal actor, whether it's a lawyer, a shareholder, or any other profession that can benefit and seize the opportunities, especially in the GCC region for the digital gaming industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron, thank you for that question. So the GCC, let's be clear, I think is the most underrated market when it comes to esports and online gaming. There is an example that I draw on every time somebody mentions this. It's usually an argument that we're having about Asia versus the GCC because Asia is statistically known to be the biggest region in terms of play-to-earn gaming or general online gaming. But I actually think the GCC really, if the assessment was done, would take that crown. And if we think of, for example, PUBG, for those of us that have been in esports gaming for a period of time, PUBG back in 2017, 2018 was the largest online game, certainly one of the largest online games. And the mobile version, many people don't know this or realize this, but I believe the statistic was that the Saudi region alone was spending something like $1 million a day on in-game purchases, skins, overlays, anything you need. And so the number one thing I say to people is, parking the legal side of things aside, I actually think the region is very, very prime for gaming and esports gaming. And I think we've seen, events here in Dubai, and we've seen esports gaming events in Dubai as well now. And so I think what we're seeing is actually not the growth, but the showing of how popular it is in this region. When we look at this in a legal vein, understanding why this is important, actually in the GCC is important for two reasons. The first is the legal reason. Okay, you have to ensure that what your in-game items or your game protocol itself is doing and deploying doesn't tip into any of the country's securities laws. You will get local counsel, you will have somebody check that out, you will understand more of it. You would obviously want to do that for every country that you're planning on operating in or making your game available to. And really the reason for that is because there are very old securities laws that catch a lot of the esports gaming, a lot of the in-game purchases, NFTs, swapping, marketplaces. So those are things that you really need to concentrate on and look at. Then there's the second consideration, and that's actually the religious element, the fundamental part of things. We know that there are regions within the GCC, states, territories, and regions that encompass their Islamic faith very strongly. And obviously within that strength of faith, they have a very, they have a prohibition and anti-sentiment towards gambling. And although we can think whatever we want of that, it doesn't matter. There is an element of esports that some elements of it draw in a gambling aspect. And we've seen this. And while we may not consider it to be gambling in the West, or how perhaps we've been taught or raised or shown what gambling is, there are some who carry their faith, who are of the older generation, who will see things like, oh, my son is putting money in this game and he's getting more money out, and he's winning something and he's getting more money out. And this perhaps feels like gambling. And of course, there are rules and regulations around that as well. So you have to really make sure that you examine fully before you deploy any type of esports, play to earn, rewards, blockchain-based gaming. Obviously, I'm encompassing this as digital assets because these are a type of digital assets within anything that you build, and make sure that you look at it from every avenue of that may have possible risk. So, Maroon, has that answered your question?
Yes, thank you. So you talked about the religious aspect and the dynamic, but I just wanted to be sure what is the name of the game that you mentioned and is popular in the Saudi region or the GCC region?
So this was back in 2017, 2018, a game that's called PUBG. PUBG is the abbreviation. It's Player Unknown's Battlegrounds. And the mobile version was one of the most played. It was certainly one of the most played games in the UAE. I know it was in Saudi at the time as well. In fact, I remember going to cafes in Dubai that were themed based around this game. So I remember how popular it was. Whether it's as popular today, I imagine it's not, because games tend to have a downward trend on popularity and player base, but I know it's still very popular.
Thank you for your answer.
And thank you. Well, I think that takes us to about 45 minutes, which has been great. So I'm hoping that everybody has found this informative and interesting, and it's been fantastic to be here. It's always a pleasure to speak in front of the HAQQ community. I'm available online. You guys can reach me through Telegram, WhatsApp, smoke signal, carrier pigeon. There's various ways you can reach me. Unless anybody else has any questions, I think that's a great kind of time to stop.
Yeah, sorry, Kyle, if I could ask just one more question, perhaps. It's a bit on the more technical aspect of crypto assets or digital assets and finance. I'll just like to get your point of view or your opinion on the combination, for example, of practices such as securitization and digital assets. So the securitization of digital assets and the issuance of perhaps ABSs or CDOs and CDO squares on digital assets.
Yeah, so this is next generation finance using digital asset technology. It's very, very exciting, and it's very, very cool. However, there's a very simple answer for this. What we are not doing in this instance is necessarily changing any of the regulatory framework. The regulatory framework around the issuance, the creation, the sale, the swapping, the storing of promotion of securities is set. There are lots of laws around that. It doesn't matter whether you're in the ADGM, the DIFC, Bahrain, anywhere. Those laws, securities have been dealt with. What we do in this industry is a little bit of reinventing the wheel, right? We're creating a new technology which really enables legacy financial systems to catch up. I do appreciate there are some differences in that, but as a general rule of thumb, the main thing to consider is, look, if you're working with a security and you know it's a security, do two things. Engage with Securities Council, somebody local that's dedicated, that knows exactly what they're doing, and also make sure that you are aware that you are creating and issuing a security. And with that, speak to the regulator, the regional regulator, the federal regulator, whether it's the UAE, Saudi, anywhere, because regulators will always talk to you. They will always have a conversation with you about what it is you're trying to achieve, what it is you're trying to build, and you'll be able to build out those frameworks and what it is that you're trying to create so much better.
All right, amazing. And I think with that, if no one has any more questions, we're going to conclude this webinar. Once again, Cal, thank you very, very much for your time and for this informative webinar. I know that the time was short, so we had to go over everything very, very quickly. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I hope everyone has a great rest of the day and a great weekend. And hopefully, we'll see you next Friday in our next webinar.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being here.